before you go on, whoever's got the ringing like timer, can you turn off the ringer? It's a little bit distracting to me. Like I clap and then like 2 seconds later the ring rings. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Right, ready? Okay, go.
The society that the closing government wants to propose is very clear. We want to make a society where every idea is protected, whether that idea is pro-government or anti-government. We're going to prove to you why privacy is so important to the point where it cannot be infringed upon. Before I do that, let me refer to some of the points that was raised by the opposition party. So the opposition party's entire case relies on the idea that through spying these individuals, it is somehow going to increase security. We feel that that is a mere assumption. Why is that? Because when you spy on the normal lives of those individuals, when you spy on the emails, on those like telephones, and so on and so forth, we feel that the potential danger of terrorism will actually increase. Why is that? Because the terrorists will actually go more underground. They're going to use even more complicated ideas. They're going to use they're not going to just send an email to their friends saying, hey, I'm going to terrorize this area or that area. That is not what the terrorists will do, right? So if these terrorists are actually going to go under and use more complicated ideas, then it is going to become so much more difficult for the government to actually catch those terrorists. And by eavesdropping on the individuals, every individual in our society, all those normal citizens, is not going to help this government actually protect the people by catching those potential terrorists, right? And on the second level, they have talked about, two arguments, right? They first talked about the trade-off, between security and individualism. The opponent has actually rebutted successfully to this point, and even if the opposition is actually right, even if that is true, what the opposition is trying to do is to survey and watch the actions of every single individual in every single instant, and we don't believe that that is going to be effective at all, right? Second off, they have talked about the citizens, right? How citizens are actually there is a consensus of how citizens actually feel that this is going to improve their own security. We don't think that is true. Why? Because many people are actually offended by the fact that their privacy is being offended. If not, we won't even be debating on this motion, right? And second of all, even if that is true, we don't think that people having a social consensus on that is justified. Why is that? Because we feel that their privacy is actually being directly infringed upon, and it is very important for them to keep their privacy. I'm going to further elaborate on that point in my constructive. Third of all, they have came up with this weird example of how citizens will be demotivated to collaborate with the terrorists. First off, terrorists don't just approach people saying, hey, I'm a terrorist, will you help me terrorist people, right? They don't let people know that they're a terrorist, even if they want to make use of those individuals. No, sir. Even if they do want to use those individuals to terrorist people, they're not going to reveal the fact, they're not going to tell them exact directions as to what they're going to do. The individuals will actually do it unknowingly, right? So, having regard to most of the points raised by the opposition, now I'm going to go on with the case of the closing government. The closing government wants to make a society in which every idea is protected. We feel that it is very important that their ideas are not being interfered with, even if their ideas are actually anti-government. Why? Because unless clear and most obvious behavior happens, they're innocent, and the ideas that they hold can actually work in benefit of for the society as a whole. We feel that there are two different ideas that the government wants to survey on, right? There are the pro-government ideas and the anti-government ideas. In that case, the pro-government ideas, we don't really need to protect them because the government is not going to harm them anyway, and they're already being protected in the status quo. However, in the case of anti-government ideas, we feel that those anti-government ideas are actually very fundamental and very important. Why is that? Because it is the anti-governmental ideas that are actually working as the watchdogs for the society and are actually trying to bring about a change for the society, and even and it is what is actually working as a check and balance system to actually stop the government from becoming too powerful to the extent of actually controlling the citizens, right? We feel that the government always has the incentive to actually control the ideas of the citizens and to actually control the actions of those citizens. Why is that? Because if they become more pro-government, then those people will become easier to control and easier to maintain, and therefore they're going to establish a society that the government itself wants to establish, right? However, we think that very incentive is very dangerous, and that potential danger is so great to the point where we actually have to block first place, Mr. Speaker, right? Because spying on the individuals is actually directly infringing on the ideas and comfort zone of those individuals, and we feel that it is crucial to actually help those individuals protect their own privacy. So why will privacy not be protected if spying actually occurs? First, because people are aware of the fact that the government is watching them. If the individuals are actually aware that someone else is watching them, then they're going to change their ideas or change their behaviors so that the people will think positively about those individuals and so on and so forth, right? So by making these people change their course of action, the government is actually directly coercing those individuals to make their choices like, oh, that is wrong, so like, they're like trying to pass their own like ideas through the people, right? And we think that is dangerous. Why? Because if that continues, then the individuals will only become pro-government and not work as the watchdogs of our society. They're not going to like criticize the government even if the government is actually doing something wrong. We feel that the anti-government ideas are actually helpful and contribute a lot to the society. If you have a look at like the idea of Iraq war, the United States government has actually made so many policies that actually limits like freedom of speech and freedom of like ideas to be passed on from one person to another. We feel that that is very hard. Why? Because the society as a whole even now does not know what clear harms the United States has actually done. And in that case, the people cannot really criticize the government for their own actions to prevent further harm in the future. So whatever I told you today, we have told you that the closing government has clearly told you the society that we want to establish, right? We want to establish a society in which all ideas, whether pro-government or anti-government, are protected. Why? Because we feel that anti-government ideas are actually very crucial to changing the society. We feel that if we allow spying to actually happen all the time, then people are going to know that the government is watching their every move at every moment and every time. So in that case, their privacy is not being protected because they're going to change their course of action to actually meet the social idea that the government itself is setting. We feel that it is very unjust to survey like every single person at every single moment, and it is just not right to punish everyone just because there's a potential that like one or two people are going to like cause some harms to the government, and those harms should be addressed by the government itself, and those harms are not the result of those individuals. So it is definitely unfair to punish every individual in our society through this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the member of government. And we now call the member of opposition.
After Snowden has revealed intervention in privacy, like revealing existence of NSA, what we found out is a number of Americans supported the idea of intervening into privacy. The reasoning is that they think that the public sphere's security is something that governments should protect, and they believe that because they have the capacity to do so, they believe that the government should preventively stop that. They believe the bombing of those evil terrorists, killing ordinary citizens, and attacking those workplaces for ordinary people is unjustifiable and should be preemptively stopped. We believe that this publicness is something that we have to remember when we intervene, and we think it can be easy to justify our intervention. So I'm going to engage on the government side and then tell you why we have a justification to take the privacy of a broad number of people, and second tell you the workability of this and what kind of people we can catch preemptively. So firstly, regard to the closing government. So closing government told us the idea about how the anti-government speech will be increased. First, we couldn't understand how this is going to happen, and moreover, we think that we think that there will be some amount of speeches the stance that we're going to provide is we're not going to ban it, but we're going to disincentivize the existence of those speeches that prompt people to conduct terrorism and kill people. We think that these speeches should be restricted, and those people should feel some certain fears. So we want to hear what kind of speeches they want to protect in the real concrete cases, other than these prompting of terrorism attack. And then the next step, they told us at the end of the day, all the speeches will be dominated by a pro-government, believing in supporting the war and all kind of things. Well, we think that we think that it's not a black and white picture, right? There exists liberals who believe that war and government's expansion of power is legitimate. We think that people will still be there. We think that we can understand why this anti-government people they talk about is so crucially important. And then I'm going to debate to the government, opening government's case about case, and they told us that wiretapping and all kind of things has no workability because those terrorists were hiding in closed areas. Two responses to this. We think that firstly, if their logic is true, then what happens is that all people will have to meet face to face and talk to each other. They cannot do email, they cannot use phones, right? We think that case is very unrealistic, and therefore their assertion is wrong. But even if that is true, we think that is good, right? Because we can extremely damage the efficiency of those terrorists to successfully conduct terrorism attack. How is it going to happen? Well, we think that those terrorists have to always be together. They have to cannot share the information what timing they should conduct terrorism attack, what places they should attack, and what kind of weapons they can share. Therefore, we think that organizational attack will decrease dramatically. Preemptive measure works. So opening government is not sure. So let's move on to our extensions. Firstly, we're going to ask the question of why we can't intervene to broad number of people's privacy who can mitigate that right. So we have two reasons why. Well, firstly, we say that the privacy that they talk about is very arbitrary, and we think that government, our side, our model, can mitigate the harm in very extent. And we think that firstly, the measure that the PRISM has taken is to use the metadata as a tool to see what kind of terrorism attack is going to be conducted. Therefore, those members of the government will not always look into the detailed information and never have an opportunity to utilize that privacy information for the private sake. Therefore, there will be no tangible damage inflicted to that particular individual that will be harmed. And moreover, if that person is not directly related to this terrorist attack, then there will be no harm directly involved in those individuals. And then and for those characters, we think that this feeling of dissatisfaction is fine because we think that government always have a need to intervene to some certain privacy. For instance, we check the individual, check the economic situation, right? And we ask them to reveal their privacy because that is necessary for us to gather tax and to run the government. So we think that this dissatisfaction cannot be a reason to not do that. And then we think that okay, and also a second reason why we think that there's a justification for taking away the privacy of those innocent people they talk about is because of state's duty. Two reasons. We think that the public sphere and security is something that individuals cannot preserve by themselves. It's impossible for individuals to run around the neighbor and find and check all those neighbors, the neighbors and whether they have weapons or not. It is only the state who can do it. And second, we think that the people have a right to feel some certain form of protection because that is extremely important. We want to protect because people are opening.
So, sir, if you allow wiretapping and if there are other terrorism events because people go underground and you weren't able to prevent that, if you actually fail in achieving security, then are you going to, opt out of this?
Okay, so please tell us at least one reason how you're going to deal with the problem that our side is proposing. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to tell you what kind of terrorists we're going to catch and how people will feel much more scared. Well, the two kinds of characters. Well, firstly, we think that in the current context of the United States, there exists a lot of individual terrorists who are driven by the political agenda that is widely spread on the internet. Those people go to the internet and reach the website that tells them the justification to attack society, because those websites tells them that they're libertarian principle, and they tell us that the governments are bad people, and then they need the violent measure to tell the society how evil the government is. And those people are oftentimes inculcated with these values. What those people are going to do is to go to the internet, gather the weapon, ingredients for the weapon, and capture and gather that and make weapons. They're going to use that bomb the building. And we think that this PRISM and NSA works fine to prevent those kind of things to happen. Because by looking at what kind of things they're buying on the internet, we can certainly know that that person is preparing for attacking a massive attack to the government building, the official building where ordinary people are living. And therefore, we say that these attacks will be prevented. And secondly, we say that ordinary people will no longer have to fear about those terrorists damaging the security of the society. We think that those individuals' rights is also important, and for the sake of fulfilling government's duty to protect the public security, we're very happy to vote.
Thank you very much to the member of opposition. We now call the government whip.
So today the government is very, very confused about what kind of society that the opposition wants to make. Because what they're saying is that they're going to promote national security with spying citizens, Mr. Speaker. And in first level, that won't be achieved because the terrorists will be disguised even more. But they said that's even beneficial because the efficiency of these terrorists will be actually deterred. Mr. Speaker, what they're saying is that in expense of the every second every citizen is being watched, in expense of that huge punishment, they're going to, make the communication a little slower. That's what they're saying, Mr. Speaker. And we think that that kind of harms and benefit analysis doesn't work in this case, because making the communication slower is not actually a huge benefit that this motion or the counter motion is going to bring to the society in expense of every citizen, every single second being watched by the government, being coerced by the government into making pro-governmental actions, Mr. Speaker. Today, the government is saying that with spying, the opposition will not achieve their goal of watching those terrorists or deterring or making the terrorists stop their action, but actually they're going to coerce every single individual into making some behaviors that they're actually not supporting. Why is that? Because we think the awareness itself, the citizens' awareness itself leads to coercion. When the citizens are aware of the fact that the government is actively watching them in every second of their move, in every second of their speech, they will be actually coerced to make these behaviors, make these speeches, or even thoughts regarding the pro-government, Mr. Speaker. That is what will happen. And we think that coercion is very detrimental in democratic society. Why? Because the very assumption of democratic society is that every idea is valid, Mr. Speaker. Why is that? Because every idea can actually counter-prove itself. Every idea can actually check and balance itself. That is why we think anti-governmental ideas existing in the society, warlike ideas existing in the society is actually important in this case, because government always has the incentive to control the public opinion, Mr. Speaker. Government has always the incentive to actually intervene into the process of the people's thinking and actually change their process of thinking. Mr. Speaker, when this incentive is so huge for the government, we think that it is actually our citizens' job to stop this process from even beginning, Mr. Speaker. We should never ever let the government take the advantage, take the justification for intervening to every citizen's life. Why? Because they have a huge incentive to control these people's thinkings, because they want to get hold of the power of their citizens, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir.
You're not even your opening, because answering my PYD, when there's a tangible danger you can interfere, you're saying no intervention regardless of the scope.
We didn't say that, because when there's a tangible harm existing in the society, we think that's a very different issue. Why? Why? Because they haven't proven what kind of tangible harm will exist, and they haven't proven how they will actually enhance national security. When the government has actually proven that these terrorists will end up even more disguised, will end up with even more complicated methods, which the government can never ever detect. And in this case, we're even status quo that the government should actively watch every second of their citizens' life and coerce them to make decisions that they're not own, Mr. Speaker. So in that case, the harm is so much bigger than the benefits that they're proposing of slowing down the communication between the terrorists. We think that benefit is really smaller compared to the harm that we get from spying these citizens. So we don't think that they're actually rational enough. No, thank you, sir. So, fine, really hot. My questions. Regarding the first class, we think that actually regarding the justification of this motion, Mr. Speaker, so we think that it is actually very justified, or it is not justified for the government to intervene in this process. Why? Because we think there is a huge incentive, as the closing has certainly mentioned, Mr. Speaker. When the government has an incentive to actually make the people think in their own way, when the government is actually incentivized to do this, we think it's citizens' job to stop them from beginning that process. Why? Because if the citizens don't do it, the government will do it. Why? Because there is a huge incentive for the government to hold power over their citizens, Mr. Speaker. That is why they are so much incentivized to actually watch upon these people's behaviors and actually change them accordingly to what the government is believing, to what pro-governmental ideas mean, Mr. Speaker. Since there is a huge incentive in that, we think it is justified. But in the second level, we think it's also justified regarding that this spying is not going to address or is not going to solve the problem of terrorism, Mr. Speaker, because it's actually going to make those terrorist attacks go far beyond the reach of the government, go far beyond the reach of the citizens. What they have mentioned was so ridiculous. So they have mentioned how terrorists will approach these individuals and say, I'm a terrorist, will you help me, will you give me that money? And we'll have this contract, and you will give this money, and I'll give this to you. And is that going to happen, Mr. Speaker? It's not going to happen from the first place. And second, even if it happens in the status quo, with the spying, we think terrorist attacks will be even more and more disguised. Yes, sir.
Then what are you doing with terrorists above the surface under your characterization? At least we have a mechanism to detain them, as explained in the...
Sir, terrorists have no incentive to go above the surface, Mr. Speaker. Under the surface, because when it's above the surface, probably the citizens will know, government will know, everyone will know. And secondly, we're saying that this awareness itself, when the citizens are aware of the fact that the government are watching them, is this awareness itself, it's very harmful. Why? Because citizens are coerced into making behaviors that are actually pro-governmental. Why? Because even if their private information will not be released in public by the government, even if that's true what they said, they said the harms won't happen because government will not simply release private information to public. Even if that doesn't happen, the awareness itself is harmful, Mr. Speaker. The awareness itself is a harm. Why? Because people are, unknowingly coerced into making decisions, coercing into making judgments about themselves or about their behaviors in a pro-governmental way. And we think this coercion itself that lies in the society is very harmful. Why? Because it actually deters the check and balance system that is in the status quo. Those watchdog theory that my beautiful member has explained, all those things will not happen in society when these individuals are coerced into making those kind of behaviors. And for that, we are very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much, Madam Whip Speaker. We now call the opposition whip.
First of all, I'd like to deal with the case of clothing government. The case of we people will be forced to obey to the government, and this is extremely harmful. And secondly, thirdly, I'd like to enhance our extension. I'd like to explain how our extension is extremely important. Firstly, we specify the mechanism how such a kind of taking people's privacy away is now used to now cracking down a certain kind of terrorists. They're now detecting a certain kind of people from mass shooting. And also, secondly, how simply because what we're talking about is extremely closely related to public sector. And this clearly means people, all the people should cooperate to exterminate such a kind of public threat which gives extreme insecurity to all the national citizens living in our country. Firstly, I'd like to deal with their case. So they're somehow saying under the status quo. So people like the anti-war, the people having anti-government idea should will be prevented from expressing their opinion, and that's harmful. But firstly, this is another title we should talk about. The title we should talk about is the violating societal security, violating hurting national citizens. That is the title of this debate. And the people expressing their anti-government idea to the people is another title of the debate because they are not violating social security. And secondly, even if their title is hurting people like the violent Marxism or the communists or the revolutionists, we don't think that kind of idea is uniquely prevented by taking this proposal. Because already under kind of freedom, there is a certain kind of taboo upon them. And we think that kind of idea is now already prevented to spread to the society. No.
Sir?
Okay.
Aside from all of our benefits, please engage us upon our value, because why do we have proportionality if blocking of everybody is the best way to prevent
Exactly, going on to the first point. Why we don't think spying do not infringe people's right of privacy. So we specify the mechanism how privacy is used. Firstly, we use metadata of a mass collection of people's communicating data. And secondly, computer analyze what word is offensive to the people or not. And thirdly, other data is just discarded. And that such a kind of detected offensive idea is now used to investigate a certain group of people. In this scenario, we don't think vast majority of people's all the privacy of right is infringed by this kind of utilizing metadata. The people whose privacy right, whose right of privacy is now infringed is only detected and only suspected people by the government. And this clearly shows infringe a certain kind of privacy right or suspected right is alright. Because we the police investigate a certain kind of people and detect he is suspected, he is imprisoned for a certain kind of term. And this clearly infringes such people's right to privacy, right? So this clearly shows infringing the right of privacy of the suspected people is not unique to this proposal. It's already happening under the kind of framework. Now we also think how this kind of utilizing metadata is extremely workable to detect and cracking down a certain kind of mass shooter. Because we are saying detect who are communicating with each other, who are attending to provoke such a kind of terrorism is successfully detected by this kind of utilizing metadata. We can know where to go. We can know who attended to go. So this clearly shows utilize such a data can actually have a vulnerability. It can actually detect who is going to do terrorism. Actually preventing public threat from occurring to national citizens.
Please, sir.
Yes, Kofi.
So, the justification for further infringing on these people is that they're already infringed. What is that a justification?
No! The title we are talking about is already suspected people who can be a potential criminal to a certain group of people. It clearly shows it's alright to infringe such a kind of people's rights. No. So talking about Salmon, with the clothing portion is uniquely talking about how protecting societal security can override people's privacy right. Uniquely in the case of terrorist groups, ladies and gentlemen. We are saying what we are talking about is a public threat, which have a potential threat to all the national citizens living in our country. Which clearly shows all the national citizens living in our country have a broad and a general duty to help the government detect public threat and prevent public threat from occurring to ourselves ladies and gentlemen, no justification coming from the government side.
Sir,
No. Why? Why? Only a certain group of, why only certain kind of limited people have only right to, only obligation or the only duty to help the government? We are saying all the national citizens have a duty to exterminate mass shooting because people actually have a will to require government to exterminate potential mass shooter, potential terrorist groups, ladies and gentlemen. We are not the violent democratic consensus. We are now respecting people's aggregation of will and achieving the goal of public. We are talking about public sector. We are talking about public sector. Clearly show people, all the people, have the duty to help the government to get. So this is clear, unique contribution coming from the closing abortion, and thank you for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Whip Speaker. Yes, continue.